Imagine this night. Dolby Theater, Los Angeles. Hundreds of stars in the hall, millions of people in front of the screens. The air is filled with sparkle, laughter, and anticipation. Cameras are clicking. Jokes are coming from the big stage. The audience is applauding. And suddenly, silence. I stand up, take a few steps, and the whole world freezes. One blow. One sound that cuts through the festive atmosphere. And in that instant, my path, my life, my career, everything is turned upside down. I was known as a person who always smiled, as an actor who gave the world goodness, warmth, and hope. I was a boy from Philadelphia who managed to climb to the top of Hollywood. I was loved by millions because I was real, because I was my own person. But one decision, one action, made with the belief that I was protecting the most precious, turned into the worst fall for me. This is a story not only about movies and awards. This is a story about a person, about love and pain, about mistakes and lessons, about how one night can change everything. And yes, I will lead you along this path myself, from the beginning to the moment when I raised my hand, and with it raised the storm that destroyed my triumph. I was born into a world without red carpets or camera flashes. My world back then was simple and loud. The streets of Philadelphia, the smell of hot pies from the stands, the rumble of buses, music from open windows. I grew up surrounded by noise and rhythm, and it was probably this rhythm that instilled in me a love of words and music. I was an ordinary guy with a dream. We didn't have luxury at home, but there was energy, laughter, arguments, and the belief that even from a small neighborhood you can reach the big world. I found myself in rap. Everyone around me was looking for something, and I found power in words. Rap was my voice, my freedom. When I composed rhymes, I felt that I could change everything, that I was heard, that I was important. And you know, one day I was really heard. My friend and I created a duo called DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. And imagine, we are still very young, but our tracks are starting to play on the radio. I heard my own voice in the speakers for the first time, and my heart jumped out of my chest. That was the moment when I realized, dreams are real if you are not afraid to believe in them. But success is not always only light. It quickly brings shadows. I earned money that I could not even dream of, but just as quickly lost it. The tax service knocked on the door, and suddenly I was almost at the bottom. Imagine, yesterday you were a star, and today your wallet is empty. It was a bitter truth. Talent and popularity are no guarantee of stability. But I didn't give up. At the moment when it seemed that the doors had closed forever, new ones opened. Television. The series The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air became my second birth. Each episode was like a part of my own story. I played a guy who gets into the world of luxury, but doesn't forget about his roots. It was me, only on the screen. And people felt my sincerity. They laughed with me, cried with me, and I became their guy for them. That series changed everything. It not only gave me a new chance, but also opened the door to Hollywood. From there, big roles, blockbusters, world premieres began. But most importantly, it taught me that even after the hardest fall, you can get up. And that strength is not in never making mistakes, but in not stopping after a mistake. I always tried to be someone who gives people hope, and that's why the world loved me. I wasn't just an actor. I was a friend to millions. The smile, the warmth, the lightness, all of it was genuine. Because I believed, good should sound louder than pain. When the era of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air ended, I knew there was more to come. I was no longer just a kid from the neighborhood or a TV hero. I felt like it was time for big movies. And Hollywood really opened the door for me. Imagine the moment when I first saw my poster on a whole building in the city center. My smile, my face on a billboard where thousands of people passed by every day. It was another level. The films Bad Boys, Men in Black, Independence Day made me a world star. I wasn't just acting. I was becoming a symbol of the era. People went to the movies because they wanted to see me on the screen. My characters were different, sometimes funny, sometimes serious, but always real. And that was the main thing. I always put a part of myself into them, my kindness, my faith, my light. When I was running around the screen with aliens or saving the world from disaster, people still saw in me the same guy from Philadelphia. They felt that I was theirs, and that is why they loved me. And the higher I rose, the more responsibility I felt. Because fame is not just about money or fame. It's a burden. When millions are watching you, you no longer belong to yourself. You belong to the public. And I accepted this role. I wanted people to know, good always wins, and even in Hollywood you can remain real. My real breakthrough as an actor came when I took on serious roles. The movie Ollie, about the boxing legend. The movie The Pursuit of Happiness, about a father's fight for his son's future. It was in a different league. I was no longer just a blockbuster star. I became the voice of stories that made people cry, inspired them, gave them the strength to go on with their lives. I remember filming The Pursuit of Happiness. I didn't act in the scene where my character spends the night in a public toilet with his son. I felt that pain as if it were mine. And when we were filming that scene, I had real tears flowing. After the take, the whole crew was silent. And at that moment I realized, acting is not about fame. It's about the truth that you give to people. I became more than just popular. I became a symbol that you can rise from the streets and become an inspiration to millions. I had a home, a family, the love of the audience. I was at the top, and the whole world believed, Will Smith is a man who embodies goodness. But even when you're at the top, even when the whole world is giving you a standing ovation, somewhere nearby there's always a moment waiting to shatter that perfect image. Little did I know then that one day, one act on a big stage would destroy all that love in a matter of seconds. I knew that after that scene at the Oscars, my life would never be the same. In an instant, I was no longer a winner, no longer an actor, no longer a person, but a headline, a meme, a target. What I did was perceived differently. Some applauded it, calling it a defense of the woman I loved. Some condemned it as an act of aggression. But for me, it was not about the show, not about the cameras. It was about the heart. At that moment, I acted not as an actor, not as a star, but as a man who could not allow himself to humiliate his wife. But the world does not forgive impulses, especially when you are at the top. I felt the reputation I had built over the years begin to crumble before my eyes. Contracts became ghosts, studios feared being associated with the scandal, friends turned away, and critics threw words like stones. I experienced it as if every day was a new sentence. And yet I understood. This was my choice, my action, and I must bear the consequences. It's at times like these that you start to ask yourself the real questions. Who are you without the fame? Who are you without the applause, the red carpet, the spotlight? Can you remain yourself when the world is trying to erase your name? Doubts began to haunt me. But despite the pain and loss, I knew this story is not about the end, but about transformation. So I did what I should have done a long time ago. I was alone with myself. Without cameras, without interviews, without the image of the perfect actor. I began to analyze why I reacted the way I did. What wounds from the past still govern my present. It was painful because I had to take off all the masks I had worn for decades. I looked in the mirror and saw not a star, but a person who was still struggling with his fears, complexes, and pain. Yes, I paid with my career. I lost projects, trust, a part of the world that once seemed unshakable. But at the same time, I gained something more important, honesty with myself. And, perhaps, this is where my true path lies. Not just to be an actor, but to be a person who has the right to make mistakes and the strength to rise after falls. But what happened at the awards ceremony? It was supposed to be a celebration. The biggest night in Hollywood, the red carpet, the cameras, the glitz, the smiles, the gorgeous dresses and tuxedos. I sat next to Jada, trying to feel calm, even though I was always tense inside. Everyone was waiting for the winners to be announced, for the jokes from the hosts, for a moment that would forever remain in the history of cinema. And that's when something happened that no one expected. A comedian, standing on stage, cracked a joke. To most, it would have been innocent, just another barbed line in the style of a ceremony. But to me, it was a knife to my wife's heart. He made fun of her illness, of what had been pain, struggle, nights of tears and conversations for us. And I saw her eyes. They filled with a shadow of resentment, and that shadow was heavier than any award. At that moment, time disappeared from my mind. I no longer heard the laughter of the audience, saw no cameras, felt no millions of eyes. I saw only the woman next to me, whom I had sworn to protect. And so I stood up. Step by step, I climbed onto the stage. People still didn't understand what was happening. They thought it was part of the show. But it wasn't a show. It was my truth, my reaction, my limit. I walked up to him, and my hand flew up into the air. A slap. Loud, sharp, unexpected. And the hall fell silent. The cameras captured the moment that spread across the world faster than any film I'd ever been in. I returned to my seat, still feeling the adrenaline thumping in my ears. And then my words came out, sharp, angry, direct. Words that could no longer be. I protected her. But with that blow, I destroyed what I had been building for decades. At that moment, I did not yet realize that my actions would forever become part of history. Not a movie, not a role, not an Oscar win, but this act. When the noise died down, when the cheers and laughter dissolved into the air, an emptiness settled over me. I sat in my seat, holding Jada's hand, feeling my heart beating so loudly that the entire room could hear it. The cameras no longer seemed invisible. They were looking straight into my soul. Every movement, every breath, was no longer mine. It belonged to the world. And then I realized, I had just done something that could not be undone. People stopped laughing. Some lowered their eyes, some whispered. In this hall where I had once been a favorite, it became noticeably cold. And although the lights were still shining in my face, I could feel the darkness. When my name was announced among the winners, I went up to the stage with the same hand that I had used to strike a few minutes earlier. In my hands was a statuette, a symbol of the dream I had been pursuing all my life. I should have felt triumph, but inside me only an empty bell rang. There were tears and excuses in my speech, a plea for love and forgiveness. But I could see that in people's eyes there was not triumph, but shock. And this scene, which was supposed to be the apogee of my career, turned into a stigma. After the ceremony, everything moved quickly. Messages, headlines, the first comments. They poured in like an avalanche that covered me head-on. The phones didn't stop ringing. People asked questions, explained, discussed, condemned me. Some called me a hero, others a criminal. And I understood. Now it didn't matter what kind of actor I was, what roles I played, what records I set. Everyone saw only one thing, my shot. In the silence after everything, I was left alone with myself. And there, in this soundless space, I was first struck by a true realization. I had become the enemy of my own dream. In protecting what was most precious to me, I had lost what I had spent my whole life building. After that night, the world I had considered my home suddenly became a stranger. In the first hours after the ceremony, I felt only silence from the friends and colleagues who had previously greeted me with smiles and hugs. The phone rang incessantly, but not to support me. Only headlines, inquiries, comments that tore at my soul. Studios I had worked with for years suddenly began to distance themselves. Projects that were supposed to start were frozen. People who called me a friend were silent. Even those who had previously applauded my roles now dared not look me in the eye. It was a silent betrayal, without words, without open aggression, but scarier than anything. I saw the coldness in their gazes, felt the distance in their messages, and understood. Those who had once applauded me standing up had now turned their backs. And the worst thing is, it wasn't just about my career. It was about trust, about my name, about my reputation. I lost everything I had built up over the years. Not only projects and money, but also what made me my own in this world. The public was divided. Some said I was a hero because I protected my wife. Others called me a showbiz rapist. I found myself in the middle of a storm with no clarity, no one to hold my hand. Sometimes I would sit at home in silence and think, how could everything change so quickly? How could a world-class star become an alienated person in one moment? And then I realized that Hollywood is not just an industry. It is a machine that does not tolerate deviations. It promises you fame, but it does not always promise support. And it was then that I felt that I had lost not only opportunities, but also those who were supposed to be there for me. Despite everything, I remained true to myself. I knew that my kindness, my protection of my family, was not a betrayal, not a weakness, but a strength. And even when my closest colleagues turned their backs on me, I realized that the real test is not in pleasing everyone, but in remaining myself, even when the whole world says otherwise. It was a time of solitude and rethinking, a time when I realized that falling does not always mean the end. And that's when my inner journey began, the path from scandal to understanding my own strength, from loss to rebirth. After the scandal, I was left alone. No cameras, no spotlights, no noise from the hall. Just silence, an empty room, and a mirror in which I saw the real me, without masks or roles. At first, it was scary. I felt guilty, ashamed, and tired, as if millions of eyes were condemning my every breath. But at the same time, it was the first moment when I could really see myself, not as a hero, not as a favorite of the public, but as a person who has the right to make mistakes and the right to make his own decisions. I began to recover gradually. I learned to listen to myself and my emotions, not to hide behind jokes or roles. I spent most of my time with my family. Jada and I talked for hours. Sometimes we just stayed silent, holding hands. Her support was my salvation. And then I realized, true strength is not in fame or awards, but in the ability to love and be loved, even when the world seems hostile. I started working on myself, meditation, sports, reading, reflecting on my own mistakes. Every day was a small step towards a new me. I realized that falling doesn't destroy you if you're ready to learn from it. And even when Hollywood was silent, I felt an inner awakening, a desire to regain my voice, reclaim my story, and be honest with myself. I also learned that kindness is not weakness. My defense of Jada, which led to condemnation, actually showed me my strength. I decided that I would never again be ashamed of my decisions, as long as they were based on love and sincerity. And no matter what people say, I remain the same man who always strived to be truthful, warm, and sincere. Gradually, interest in me as an actor returned. Not because of the scandal, but because people felt my sincerity, my path, my inner strength. I began to choose projects that resonated with my life, with my values. And with each step, I felt my confidence in myself being reborn. This period taught me the most important thing. True victory is not in applause or awards, but in the ability to remain yourself, even when the whole world says otherwise. I realized that falling can be the most powerful motivator if you are not afraid to face your fears and move forward.